Hello and welcome to episode number 56 of the Know Your Physio podcast. I'm your host and Preschel, helping you discover your science to optimize your life. And today's guest is Wade Lightheart. He's an author, athlete, nutritionist, and expert on fixing digestion. He's a three-time Canadian national all-natural bodybuilding champion who competed as a vegetarian, believe it or not, former Mr. Universe competitor, host of the Awesome Health podcast, and one of the world's premier authorities on natural nutrition and training methods. Having majored in sports science at the University of New Brunswick, he has authored numerous books on health, nutrition, and exercise, which have sold in over 80 countries. Wade also serves as an advisor to the American Anti-Cancer Institute and is co-founder and president at Bioptimizers, a digestive and health optimization company, the very company that I take so much pride in partnering with and that actually sponsors this show. So he's been in the health industry for over 25 years. He's coached thousands of clients and is sought out by athletes and high-performance-oriented individuals worldwide for his advice on how to optimize their health and fitness levels. I actually had the chance to meet him last year at the Biohacking Conference and enjoyed some wonderful conversations in the realm of health optimization. And as you will soon hear, he is unparalleled in his ability to take apart the best and latest science and make it practical, accessible, and actionable. And for that, I admire him very much. Few alive have traveled farther or crusaded harder on behalf of helping individuals transform their digestive health, wellness, and overall lives than Wade. After competing in the Mr. Universe and his health failing him following a competitive victory, Wade began to search for answers, and in the process, he learned so much about what makes digestion work, along with other principles that he calls the awesome health system. Today's podcast keys in on magnesium, and we will soon have this podcast available as a video format so you can see just how blown away I was by some of the unique and important perspectives that Wade was able to deliver today, as far as highlighting why it's so important for us to ensure that we're getting enough magnesium in the modern world. So, with that said, I hope you guys enjoy the show, and I'll see you on the other side. Well, Wade Lightheart, here we are on the Know Your Physio podcast. Welcome to the show. It's such an honor to have you, such an honor to have met you at the Biohacking Conference a year back. Welcome. Thank you for being
Great
here
to
with
be
us.
here. Thanks for having me.
Sweet. So why don't we start with why? Can you tell us a little bit about why you do what you do?
We're on a mission to transform humanity, its possibilities, in order to experience what we call biologically optimized health by providing the elements that allows to the body to operate with all of the essential quantities and qualities in a perfect symphony that delivers what I call awesome health, biologically awesome, optimized health, if you want a more scientific term. And in order to do that, we have to go back on both Matt and I's historical aspects. So Matt and I grew up in small town Canada. He's the co-founder of the company. And we had unique experiences. We moved through a variety of different situations where we both ended up being professional personal trainers for the who's who in Vancouver, Canada, after careers in physiology, nutrition, high performance, him as a trainer and a UFC guy or a MMA guy. UFC wasn't really that prominent back then. And then myself as in the high performance bodybuilding. And one of the things that we both fell in love with was helping people overcome their current limitations. And when you do that, there's a transformation that happens within the psyche or the spirit of the individual, which is noticeable, remarkable, and palpable, and that they go from literally sick to superhuman. And we've been fascinated with that process. Originally, because my older sister died at an early age because of health complications due to cancer treatment over 4 years, which had an impact on me. So I understood that life is not a guarantee, health's not a guarantee. But we were both obsessed also with, well, what is the potential possibilities for humans? And then how would we build a company around that? And as that's evolved over the years, the technology is catching up with our ability to integrate sound scientific principles, practices, products that will allow the body's function to, number one, hit a higher trajectory, and to hopefully extend for a longer period of time in what I could say a better than average performance. So what's the end goal? Okay, can we live to 100? I think that's well established. Can we live to 120? That's the guess, because there's not many people that make it to 120 out of a sample size of 8 billion people. There's a growing number of centurions, and there's a lot of people that make it to 80, which is a big improvement from, say, when my parents' life expectancy was in the 1960s, when they started implementing social care. The average life expectancy was around 67, and now it's somewhere around 80. So we've extended the possibility of life to 80 as on an average, and there's going to be a standard deviation around that. But the question really is, because the disability adjusted life expectancy, according to Professor Oshansky in the New England Journal of Medicine, indicated that the disability adjusted life expectancy has increased. In other words, the dependency on life compromising medications, interactions, components is now, we've extended life, but that extension of life is relatively miserable for the people that are there. And our goal is to extend people's life, but making that life so awesome that you don't want to check out. And so can we be 80-year-olds still out on our surfboards? Can we be enjoying our great-grandchildren as much as we enjoyed our grandchildren or our children, because we have the vibrancy, the energy, and the vitality to do so? And I do think that that's possible, and we're committed to that goal, both in the short term for the performance side and in the interim, and also for the longevity side over the long game. And we've been at it for 18 years and have set a good track record so far, and we're going to continue on in the future.
And I want to know how special it has been for me to be a part of the Bioptimizers team and to help you guys carry this message forward. The way that I see it, and what you just described, if I can summarize it, is you are extending a lifespan through the quality of the present moment with quality nutrition, quality supplementation. It's not about extending the lifespan for the sake of more moments. It's more about extending lifespan through the quality of that presence. And it seems like the joy that you bring people and the transformations you're able to accomplish are what really, really fuel you. And now you've done that in different formats. I think as you have evolved as a professional, as you evolve as an individual, practicing what you preach, you're able to enjoy these new avenues by which you can help people. And it only makes sense that now you're here by Optimizers, really applying the best and latest to help others. So thank you for sharing this with us. Thank you for being here again. And thank you for having me as part of your team. It's such an honor and a pleasure. So I do want to focus this podcast. I want to focus on magnesium because of all the supplements, and I'll just start with a personal anecdote. Of all the supplements that I take, you open up my cabinet, I have hundreds of supplements. There are some that I'll take every day. There's some that I'll take once a week, maybe twice. Some that I'll take maybe once or twice a month. There's some that I probably haven't taken in a few years, but they're there anyway, just in case. Now, if I had to pick one supplement to take for the rest of my life every single day, it'd be Magnesium Breakthrough. Now, would you mind sharing with my audience why that's probably a good idea?
Thank you. In order to understand the present, we have to understand the past. And we have to understand the past and the consequences of choices that we made then, which seemed like a good idea at the time, that led us to the present moment. And so rather than look at things through conspiracy type mindset, we can look through it as this seemed like the best idea at the time, and that solved one set of problems, but it gave rise to another set of problems. And anybody that's been in business or anybody that's engaged in sports, will discover that you solve one problem, but that brings forth the next level of problems. If we go back to World War II and you go, what does World War II have to do with why you love magnesium right now? It has everything to do with it. And you go, what are you talking about? Well, and people have to realize that in World War II, we went through preemptive to a big depression, a world war, and wars bring a rapid rise in technology out of the fear that you're going to lose and the resources that are marshaled in order to produce a result. That led to the rise of jet planes, video, television communications, mass transport, the nuclear bomb. So for the first time ever, we were subjected to the possibility that we could completely annihilate the population. And concordant after the war was over, there was a population explosion. Now, any population which sees itself as under threat will expand rapidly in order to increase its survival. This is unique across all evolutionary biological systems. Okay, so what does that have to do with World War II and magnesium? Well, this population explosion led to two things. Number one, more people began to live in cities. In the 1900s, 98% of the population lived on a rural area and was involved in some sort of agricultural food production. By World War II, at the end of World War II, this was cut in half. And today it's less than 1% who are involved in food production. So we have a complete inversion of the food production. Well, how did so much change in 100 years after 12,000 years of agricultural farming, thereabouts? Well, what happened is this rapid rise of technology and the exploding birth rate called the baby boom. We went, we need to produce more food. And we went into mass manufacturing and distribution, which was cultivated also during the war, supreme systems of things. And that led to a certain amount of prosperity, but it also led to pressure points on food supply to support all these people living in cities with no connection to their agriculture. So the governments of the world said, we need to plan for this. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to institute regulatory boards to make sure that we have a staple supply of foods. We have to realize that throughout human history, famine was the number one killer of humans. Seasonal components, weather, all kinds of different things would disrupt food supply chains, and whole populations would be wiped out. Wars would ensue from this, and this was the war for scarce resources was a big part of human history. And to factor that out of the equation, you can't understand why people make the decisions. So the government board started to institute commercial monoculture farming practices. So before we would plant food, you'd put potatoes in this year and squash in next year and tomatoes next year, and you would rotate the crops over a 7-year cycle. You'd grow hemp on the soil 1 year and then plow it into the soil and let it go fallow to recondition the soil so that we'd have the essential minerals and vitamins that made the plants grow hardy, that allowed them to be strong, and that allowed them to provide all the essential nutrients that we required. Well, when we went to monoculturing, we said, well, screw that model. We need to hit this volume out till we get enough food. And how are we going to do that? Well, we found this new thing called fertilizer. We can take the leftover bomb material, which was primarily nitrogen-based. We can put that into the soil, and it seems to increase the growth rate and the yield of the food that we're producing. And that was true on one level. The consequence of that decision is the accelerated growth cycle of the food then led to a loss of the protein content of the food in order to convert to the enzymes in order to grow the food. And then the lack of enzymatic capability meant that the plants could extract less nutrients out of the soil. And because we were growing at an accelerated rate without crop rotation and reblending the minerals in, we started to exhaust the soil in that. And that led to things like topsoil erosion and also the weakening of the immune system of the plants. The plants then started to develop a variety of conditions and were more subjected to bugs, to pesticides, to funguses, to all these different things that are naturally attacking plants in an uncontrolled environment. And so we went, what else can we do? Well, we've got these other chemicals because the development of the chemical process became refined and developed much more sufficiently, largely part because of the communications, and you can share minds and come up with new ideas and read papers and get all this information that wasn't available to civilizations prior. And we went, okay, great. Well, let's let go and add these various chemicals onto the plants to kill the bugs, to kill the funguses, to kill the mold, to kill the invading bacteria cultures. And well, when we did that, two things happened. Number one, we increased the toxicity, the chemical components within the food that we were ingesting. And now our food wasn't just something that was good for us. It had an increasing amount of toxins upon it that were disruptive to our system. And the second thing was we further weakened the food supply chain. So that was okay for maybe 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. But generation by generation, the plants began to yield less and less nutrients, less and less enzymes. Probiotics that were naturally available within the soil weren't present. The mineral content of the soil began to deplete to excessive levels, particularly in North America. We lost almost all our magnesium content. And so now, 80 years later, you're sitting in Miami and you're saying, well, I'm eating these foods. If you look at, say, what are foods that are traditionally rich in magnesium? Dark chocolate, avocados, nuts, seeds, bananas, leafy greens, tofu, legumes, things like that are rich in magnesium traditionally. Well, if you compare one of those foods today and its nutrient content grown in a commercially factory farmed area versus something that was in a wild situation 80 years ago, they're not the same food. And I would invite people to go to a Mennonite farm or an Amish farm where they take a portion of the seeds, they don't use any chemicals, and they've been passed on generationally. And whatever your favorite food is, potatoes, apples, oranges, tomatoes, whatever it is, whatever your favorite food is, go take one of those, compare it to conventional grown product with chemicals and an organic one that maybe you bought at Whole Foods or something like that. And take all three of those things, cut them up, taste them, look at how they look at how they taste, look at how they feel, see the sense of satiety in your body. And you'll be very clear that what I'm telling you is absolutely experientially real, that the tomato from those environments are not the same product at all. Now, your entire life as a young person in the world today, 20, 30 years old, has never, ever even had what a tomato really was in its original case. You don't know. You don't know what it's like to have a chicken that was really free range and pecking on the ground. You don't know
I would
what it's...
probably be way more jacked if I was having real tomatoes and real chicken. Am I right?
Well, it's hard to say what the outcome would be, but I can tell you when you eat those foods, you go to locations on the planet where you do. Virtually everybody says, I can't believe chicken tastes this way. I've never tasted an apple like this. They call foods grown in these wild, unrestricted flavors superfoods. It just means that humans haven't messed around with it. That's all it means.
That is unbelievable. And I can't imagine what the compounding interest effect of that would be had I, if we introduce these interventions early on, right? If we source our foods correctly early on, I can't imagine what the effect would be after 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of eating these foods that we are taught to believe are so healthy, so nutrient dense. What do you think the difference would really be?
Well, there's two things that would be. First of all, our world population would be much less than it is because he never would have made the jump. So you have to realize you get both sides of the equation. You get the delivery of the expansion of the population. You get the development of the medical model to treat a variety of diseases. And so part of the age thing that I talked about, that age going from 67 to 80, was the development of surgical techniques and medical practices and stuff, which have extended our lives as a consequence of the limitations of our health. But now, as intelligent people looking at the world today, we go, okay, you know what? My only way around this situation right now is to be able to determine what elements are going to give me the most bang for my buck to live long and to live strong, and to also take advantage of, if you were in a car accident before, if you had a heart disease or you had a congenital genetic condition, it was curtains for you back then. Now it's not. But also, we can address issues that may have limited you now that won't limit you or extend your life. So you look at Tom Brady as a great example. He's 45 years old and had his third best offensive season in history at 45 years old in a position that almost no one makes it to 40. Okay? So he's extended his career 25% longer than the best people in the industry and stayed at a high level because he's practicing the biological optimization principles that we advocate in a healthy, high-performance situation. And so for the average person in North America, they're excessively deficient in magnesium because it hasn't been in a soil for the last 80 years. It's been depleted for all the reasons. And there's another issue. When we added all of this rapid expansion of technological communication, blue light coming thing on the screens, Wi-Fi, cell phone, electrical lines, all of those things put an excessive stimulatory effect on our nervous system. Every time you have electricity, there's a magnetic component, and when there's a magnetic component, there's an electrical component. And one of the elements that gets used up more in the modern world is magnesium. So we have two pressure points that's occurring in the modern world. One, a deficiency in magnesium from the food that we're eating, and two, an increased need to make the neurological adaptations to a highly technologically advanced world. So the humans who adapt to these changes, so if you go to Darwinian theory, it's not the strongest. It's not the strongest survive.
The ones who can best manage
It's the
change.
most adaptable. So we're having this podcast today, and our listeners who are listening today are essentially the people who are the most adaptable because they're recognizing slippage in their own life or an area that wants to address in this idea or an idealized version of what's possible for a future. They're redefining what's possible for humans, whether longevity or performance-wise or aesthetics-wise or whatever that determinant is, that's saying, hey, if I follow this pathway, I'm not going to get that. Or if I go down this route, I'm going to end up like everybody else. So now I'm going to listen to somebody in search of those answers, and I'm going to do my own set of experiments and see what happens. The one thing that I can tell you that I've learned in my entire life I spent in this industry, I'm 50 years old, is that I have never seen a product like our Magnesium Breakthrough, which is a uniquely designed magnesium product for the modern world, have so much positive impact in so many different people in so many different areas. It's largely unexpected, to be frank. I had no idea that it could have that much impact to that much people, which has led me to the conclusions I'm sharing here today, because I had to understand why it's so impactful. Why is that? It didn't make sense to me until I started to understand how magnesium is integrated in the body, the different types of magnesium, the roles that magnesium plays, and how disruptive it is in your life if you don't have sufficient levels, especially in a modernly technologically advanced world.
Okay, so let me ask you this: how come this isn't? And I don't mean to flirt with the borders of controversy here, but how come this isn't common knowledge?
Great. Because we live not in an information age, we live in an attention age. What Johnny Depp and Amber Heard gets more traction in the channels of attention than what's happening in the research facilities around the world that are illustrating these points that I'm bringing up today.
Can you tell us what exactly is in Magnesium Breakthrough?
Before I do, I want to qualify why there is 7 different types of magnesium in Magnesium Breakthrough. It's like, is that kind of overkill? It's like, isn't all magnesiums equated equal? No. If we look into biological science inside our bodies, magnesium is a key element involved in over 300 different metabolic processes. Heart regulation for your heartbeat, vasodilation to open up your arteries, the relaxation response in both smooth and striated muscle tissue, the regulation of your nervous system, the development of neurotransmitters, even the cultivation of RNA and DNA transfer in your cellular replication process. I call it the master mineral because it's involved in so many. Oh, blood sugar regulation. That's another one. If you look at what are the challenges facing our society today, okay, well, let's look at the big killers: heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. Most of those are dietary related, right? And I would think it's safe to say there's a good cross correlation between chemicalization and sugar intake and cancer. And I would say that heart disease has both a genetic but nutritional and lifestyle component. Then we look at diabetes, which is completely, especially type 2, which is the fastest growing one, which is completely correlated with lifestyle issues. And then the fourth leading cause of death is medical error, largely in part because of contraindications or complications from the treatments used to treat the first 3. The next thing that people are suffering from, which is not fatal to the same extent as other things, but certainly affects the quality of life, is depression and mood dysregulation, which magnesium plays a critical role, along with gut bacteria, involved in building the neurotransmitters that allow our brains to operate functionally. So technically, we're living at the best time it's ever been in the world history, as far as what you have access to, information, quality of life, the level of economic wherewithal that we have. All those indicators seem to be things, but guess what? They're not all the things that live to a happy life. We've hit the threshold limit of what those things can do, and now we've got to get into this side of it. So when we were looking at magnesium, there was a guy by the name of Charles Poliquin, who is, I always defer to him because Charles was He spoke 13, I think 12 or 13 languages. He used to read research from different governments and different languages because there's biases within different cultures to do research and how grants are issued and all that stuff. He was always concerned with how to make his athletes perform the best. And he was the first guy to correlate neurotransmitter dominance with Chinese medicine, the five elements, and which was a breakthrough. No one ever made that connection. And he would do a test with his high performance athletes. If they weren't dopamine or acetylcholine dominant, he just said, "You're not going to make it as an Olympic athlete. I'm not coaching you." Now, the challenge with an Olympic athlete is how quickly you can recover and rebuild your neurotransmitter capabilities inside the body and regulate the loss of key elements and minerals and nutrients through metabolism and through sweating. And he saw that magnesium was a big factor in accelerating the recovery of his athletes. So if you can train harder, you can train longer, and you can train more frequently, chances are you're going to be a better gold medal athlete. And he produced great results. And I went to a seminar with him, and he said, "Hey, I use these 4 magnesiums to offset the Olympic athlete performance." We started with those things, but then we went into the literature and we saw that there was some variance in there. And he himself had suggested that, well, he wasn't sure about some of the elements, but he took the research as far as he could. When Matt and I, what we did when he decided that we were both magnesium deficient through SpectraCell testing, and what we felt as was burnout, and I can tell you what burnout feels like. It sucks. And serial entrepreneurs will often go through that. And we both were, and we both went through it, and we both use magnesium. And we bought all these different magnesiums and started testing them individually to see what level we would hit tolerance. And tolerance is known as breaking the GI barrier or getting the runs. And we noticed that different magnesiums had different points. And we noticed that if we combine different magnesiums, our body could absorb more of it, go longer without getting the runs. Well, that was interesting. And then the research was indicating that there were different types of magnesiums that had been developed that could have a better effect and higher tolerance. And then we married all of that onto orthomolecular science, which was developed by Linus Pauling, Abram Hoffer, and Dr. David Hawkins back in the 70s to treat all sorts of disease states with supersaturating the body with nutritional components. And from that, we said, okay, let's build the world's greatest magnesium. And so through our testing process, we came down to 7 different types of magnesium, which seemed to be well tolerated, and through research were associated with a variety of different benefits, some concordant benefits with other magnesiums, but oftentimes that magnesium was associated with some particularly nuanced aspect of magnesium. And I'm going to talk about these. When you see magnesium, what the heckalate, usually whatever the 8 is just referring to the molecular model of how it's been bonded and stabilized in the body so that you can absorb and utilize it. But that molecular size is also going to determine where it gets absorbed and utilized and where it doesn't. So that's the thinking behind that. And I want to explain that to your listeners. So this isn't just a bunch of random things fired in a capsule. There is a thinking process that goes into how we cultivate and develop, and we continually refine it. We never think that we've got all the way there. We're always going to improve it. So let me walk you through these if you're okay with that.
No, please do. That's what this is for.
Okay, great. So the first thing that you're going to see, and this is a common magnesium, is a chelate, which is a protein coating that goes on top of your magnesium. This is generalized for neurotransmitters and for calming the mind, this type of things. Very common. Citrate is the next one. Now, citrate, I would say, is the one that is most associated with the runs. And the reason is citrate draws water into the intestine.
By runs, what do you mean?
What the runs means that you go to the bathroom and you get loose stool, and you know. Okay. So if you've taken, going back to Hoffer and those guys, what they would do, and they were famous with the vitamin C protocols from Linus Pauling. And what he would do is he would start increasing the dosage in divided doses of vitamin C until you essentially got the runs and had to go to the toilet. And that means that your body, literally in the intestinal tract, couldn't absorb any more of that nutrient. And then he would cut it back. Let's say you got to 10 grams, then he would cut it back to say 9 grams. And you would continue at that dosage till you got the runs again. And then you would cut it back through this titrating process until you got to your daily maintenance level to maintain a super level of that vitamin. And so you could apply this to a lot of other supplements, and we did it to magnesium because we didn't know how big the deficiency was. We knew, okay, this much prevents you from doing this, but what's the optimal dosage? There's no way of determining that. except by leveraging evolutionary responses in the body that says if you take too much, you'd vomit or you'd barf or you'd go to the toilet. Okay, great. So we know that evolution is on our side that way as we overdose on it. Okay, great. So let's go down that route and break down. And I'll explain a much simpler and easier way for people to dose up on it. So citrate, again, this is often used for laxative or acid indigestion. So a little bit of it's good. Too much is not that good. Magnesium bisglycinate. This one, the research has shown it's around high blood pressure, been successful in that. Type 2 diabetes, you can look at the research on the Pima Indians who had a high level of type 2 diabetes, and magnesium had a massive impact on that case. That's a genetic condition. Osteoporosis. Magnesium is the control element of the calcium magnesium. Calcium exists in a 2-to-1. If you have not enough magnesium, your body will start dumping calcium. So taking more calcium doesn't fix it. It can actually exacerbate an osteoporosis condition if you don't have enough magnesium. Migraine headaches. It's also associated with that, reducing that because of the vasodilation ability of it. And then the production of serotonin for feel-good neurochemicals as resulted inside the body. So that's great. Magnesium malate.
Sorry, isn't it also used for sleep? I guess the calming effect that it has can be used. That's why people use it for sleep.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a moment.
Cool.
So we got magnesium malate. This is particularly critical in the enzymatic activity in the body. You have over 25,000 different enzymatic processes in the body, and particularly around energy production. Malate is very good in that because of the way it works. It also seems to have an impact on removing toxic metals like high levels of aluminum in the body. You can do SpectraCell test, or you can do a Great Plains test to check for high levels of metal toxicity. If you were near a farming outfit, a chemical plant, sometimes these can be disrupting RNA, DNA, and energy production inside the body, and you don't even know it. Then we get into magnesium taurate. That's been associated with cardiovascular health. Taurine, of course, is a nootropic compound. We have another company that deals with just nootropics. That's a lot of fun. But it seems to look at taurine, kind of a taurine mimicker in the brain. That's also why it's also as effective against migraines. And then taurine, just so people understand, acts similar to GABA, which is gamma aminobutyric acid, which is a neurotransmitter that blocks the impulses between cells. That kind of down regulates. This is the calmness thing that often is associated with sleeping, that magnesium, especially if you're in a high stimulatory environment, a high frequency environment, cell phones, Wi-Fi in cities, things like that, a lot of blue light. There's also association with insulin sensitivity. And here's a big one, PMS. Turns out that magnesium can really help with menstrual pain, irritability, bloating, and some of the associative mood dysregulation happens. Well, then one of my favorites comes up is magnesium orotate. This is the one that's associated with orotate, seems to offset premature heartbeats and exercise capability. I have a theory. It's a theory. I want to be clear on that. It's not medical science. None of what I'm saying is science. I'm just grabbing information from papers, but there's a considerable amount of high-performance athletes, particularly in endurance sports, that develop heart arrhythmias and have to discontinue their careers or whatever. I believe that it may be associated with a depletion of essential magnesium levels, because magnesium helps regulate that heartbeat. It also reduces calcification inside heart tissue.
Yeah, I was about to say, because there's a lot of these athletes that are overtraining. As a result, you have this increased deposition of calcium in the artery, calcification. Yeah. And it's not a genetic predisposition or anything like that. It's like you're just simply overtraining.
Yeah, it's like if you go to longevity expert Peter Attia, he suggests that if you're looking from a longevity perspective, cardiovascular output in the top 2.5 percentile is optimal for longevity. To get above that point, you're probably doing more damage to the system than the benefits on a performance side. So if you look at my hat, we have aesthetics, we have performance, and we have health. And everybody is creating a balance. Usually when you start out, you're going more on a performance side or an aesthetic side. And as you get older, you're usually putting most of your money towards how do I preserve or extend my health over a long period of time. So that changes as we age. Orotate's also involved in RNA, DNA, transcription, and the synthesis of glycogen. Then we have magnesium sucrosomial, which is a new type of magnesium, which has a high delivery agent. It's a delivery system that gets it into the body in levels not achieved by any of the other types of magnesium. So we added that into it as a driver to increase dosage being delivered to your tissues. We haven't got extensive research on all of the components of it because it's a relatively new supplement, but most people report improved functionality since we added that into our product. Now, when you're dealing with magnesium, there's also a couple issues that you have to deal with. How does it get delivered? And there's three elements that will improve the magnesium getting into the cells where you need it. Humic and fulvic acid, which are the elements that plants use to convert inorganic compounds into biological available nutrients. So going back to our story in the soil, right? If the plants have enough humic and fulvic acid, they're able to produce that. They're able to convert the magnesium present in the soil. But if the magnesium present in the soil, it doesn't matter. So we put humic and fulvic in this because it's been demonstrated to improve the deliverability of these agents, as well as B6 and as well as manganese. Those elements have been added as delivery agents. And one last piece before we get into questions, because I want to preempt of as many of them as I can, and that is, well, why? How come no one else came up with this many magnesiums? What were the challenges? When you get all of these different size molecules, you change the grains of what's coming through your machine, and they stick together. And what a lot of people will do is they'll add what's called an excipient, a flow regulator that will allow those things to flow. But now you get more excipient than you get product. So you get a Me Too product that doesn't deliver quite the same amount, but it flows into the capsules really well. And then the second thing is that by Optimize, we don't like using these cheap, ineffective excipients. We don't know all the consequences of them. So we're against that. So we had to develop a new way of filtering the products through the container. We had to develop a specialized capsule in order to support it and combine all of those without the bad excipients, if you will, so that we could produce an extraordinary product. And we solved all those problems. And I think that was unique to the industry to do so.
It's interesting you brought up Peter Attia, because I'm actually getting one of my clients in touch with him and his team. And he is someone who suffered with this kind of overtraining to the point where he had calcification in his arteries because he was like nonstop on the bike with some of the most elite groups down here in Miami every single day, to the point where, you know, his sleep was trash. He was in an overly sympathetic state, probably very magnesium depleted, and just like completely addicted to that go, 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 go. And in addition to that, he's also someone that I would definitely describe as a type A individual. So it's it's the perfect storm for this sort of calcification. Okay, so now let's talk about dosing, because, you know, let's say now you're helping people get what the modern world leaves out, right? Is magnesium and bioavailable magnesium. Okay, but is there such thing as too much magnesium? Can you combine this supplementation with an effort to get more magnesium in your diet, or would that be overkill?
Well, I asked that question of myself and did some radical biohacking experiments around it, if you're interested in hearing about it.
I'm telling you, that's what this is about. Please do share.
Okay. So when I realized I wanted to test the limits, I knew that there were two fundamental problems that we were dealing with. Number one, we didn't know how much magnesium you could deal with in the body. And number two, we didn't know how much we could actually deliver into the cells if we were doing it orally. So
I think I know where you're getting. I think I know what you're going to say next.
So I contracted a naturopathic doctor, and I went to a foreign country to do this, where we began doing intravenous dosages of magnesium in increasing levels. And we topped out around 10 grams. I don't recommend it, but what's the unique experience of that high level dosage of magnesium in the system is two things. Number one, any calcification that comes up in the body, you'll feel a heat sensation as the magnesium and the calcium starts to interact with each other, and it feels like a warming or even a burning sensation. So injuries where I had calcification points, I would actually feel a burning sensation or a heat sensation. You would feel it in your brain, you'd feel it in your muscle tissues, because we were doing repeated ones of these.
Were you effectively clearing that calcification out of the brain and these sites of injury, or?
I believe so. That's my theory. I didn't have an MRI, or I couldn't tell if I was actually doing, but it certainly felt that way because I did notice increased levels of mobility, a reduction of stiffness in those areas which were present before. So I would suggest anecdotally that that's true. Maybe some research will come out sometime about that. Now, the problem is though, you can't take too much of magnesium because it can have a disruptive effect on your blood sugar. That's why you need to be under the guidance of a professional that understands it and can administer it and do so in a sophisticated manner. So I don't recommend this at home or try it at home. The other thing is, though, you also get really chill and really relaxed, and your muscular function becomes a little bit difficult because magnesium is involved in the relaxation of the muscle tissue.
And you need calcium to bind to
Yeah.
troponin to actually engage the muscle fiber. And
Yeah.
so you can reduce your strength output, your energy, etc.
Yeah, so you're kind of like, oh man, I got to get off the bed and wander over to the bathroom, but it's like really difficult, and your muscles are a little Gumby-ish.
I know people that would pay for that experience.
Yeah, I do too. I'm one of them. I paid for it. A bunch of my friends did too. So I realized, okay, first and foremost, I'm clear based on the anecdotal evidence of this burning sensation and the recovery aspect and the change in my muscle physiology that I could tolerate extremely high levels of magnesium inside the body. Okay, so the next question was, well, how can I make a convenient oral cap that I can get there in kind of a safe, systematic way over time, for the regular user without having to, be subjected to injections and the associated risks of that, or also, like there's a bunch of things that you don't want to be involved in on that sort of stuff. So I was like, okay. So that was but it proved that we could use higher doses of magnesium than might have been recommended by the RDA. So then the next level of experiment was, okay, literally following that orthomolecular procedure of dosing up. I call it the bucket theory of nutrition. And we have the bucket theory is actually a theory where I explain the entire process and you apply it to a lot of different vitamins, nutrients, minerals, and components inside the body, which is basically your life's, what we're burning in your life is like a hole in the bucket. Okay. That's the cost of your life. Now, if you're out drinking and drugging and partying, the hole in your bucket might be lighter. If you're at a high performance level, it might be higher. If you're 20, it might be higher than when you're 80. Or maybe that you start slowing down at 80 because you've exhausted your supply. Now, your whole bucket, and you can do this with each nutrient or all your nutrients, is the totality of what it would be to be full in reserve of every vitamin, every mineral, every essential component so that your body could flow and function optimally, perfectly, every single time. Okay, that's the end goal. That's the the grand point. So if we applied the same principles that Dr. Linus Pauling did, we could divide the dosage of magnesium sequentially. So let's start with 0.5 gram dosages 3 to 5 times a day. And then we add 0.5 gram overall each day until we get the runs. Now, when we did this independently with single types of magnesium, we would get the runs much sooner than if we had multiple types of magnesium in the body. And so I can get more magnesium in if I have an associated different types of types. And then there was variance within those. And we ran spreadsheets and tests, and we had a lot of, messy mistakes, you could say. But the end of the result was we came to anecdotally through experimentation, this formulation that we've had in order to get that. And literally we follow that protocol for people, and they stay there for maybe 90 days to fill up their magnesium reserves. And how do you know your magnesium reserves are in? Well, generally you'll see, if you're tracking your sleep, you'll see an increase in both deep sleep and REM sleep, right? So that's a good thing. Number 2, reported sense of overall calmness. So the reactivity to emotional distress or to the overuse of stimulants such as caffeine. So almost everyone's kind of been burnt out on caffeine, where you did too much or too much stimulants, too much neurotransmitters because you're doing, modafinil and Adderall or things like that for focus and attention. So all of those things seem to put a drain on magnesium, and magnesium in higher doses will offset it. The third tier of things is the removal of some of these things that people are reporting around the world, like, oh, suddenly my migraines went away. Suddenly I notice I don't have PMS syndrome anymore, or I notice that I have more energy when I wake up. So all these like anecdotal things, or my blood sugar stability has improved by X amount on a glucose blood meter, and all I've changed is magnesium. Well, so those correlations do have causation aspects related to magnesium, but it's hard to predict that on a widespread area. I can just report what I get on the testimonials and invite people to try it and do their own experiments. And then once you get the benefits, you start what's called titrating down. You start reducing the amount of magnesium you take on a daily basis so that you're only dealing enough. Once the bucket's full, you only have to put in the same amount that you're burning. So do you want to live with an empty bucket that you're trying to fill and deal with all the stress and anxiety of trying to fill the bucket? Or do you want to deal with a full bucket? So even if you don't hit your magnesium for a day or 2 days or 3 weeks, you got lots of reserves that your body doesn't go into a fight or flight response. And that's what we have found has worked very effectively. Most people end up operating between a dose of 0.5 gram and 1.5 grams per day based on their lifestyle, their exercise, and their individual genetics.
And how come you guys don't have L-threonate in there? I know it's very popular for people
Great
that are looking
question.
to,
And
support their cognitive performance and such.
yeah, great question. When you do threonate, there's two main suppliers in the world. And the one in the United States specifically has a patent. And the rules of the patent is that you have to take a certain dosage of threonate in your capsule in order to get a benefit. Well, unfortunately, that precludes you getting the benefit of all the other magnesiums. And threonate's a great product. And so we were at a crossroads when we were dealing with that. And so what we decided, because threonate's really good at crossing the blood-brain barrier effectively and has been associated primarily with improved sleep function, well, we decided that we would add that to our sleep product instead of putting it in a commensurate because of the limitations of the patent rules on that. And the other thing is there's another company outside of the United States that actually produces that. However, you would, if you to use it in the United States, you'd have a violation of that patent agreement, and we wouldn't be certain about the product quality of that thing, and which is a big primary importance. So to resolve it, we said we'll take threonate out, we'll add it to our customized sleep formulation, which will be released in the very near future. And we've covered both of our bases that we get the most benefits and the least amount of problems.
Lovely. And you mentioned earlier the gut microbiome and the link between magnesium and the gut microbiome. What can we do as far as a gut and digestion perspective that works synergistically with magnesium?
Yeah, and I'm gonna throttle back the information I share right now because we have a scientific team in Croatia, PhDs in microbiome. We have, I think, 13 people working, PhDs and master students, who are running a variety of experiments because, as many people know, we're a digestive health company. We're looking at ways to improve enzymatic formation, probiotic formulation, the interaction between that. And I will say this. What we do know is that there are key elements that you can add to probiotics. So different probiotics will respond to different types of food. So the type of prebiotic you use will be right for some probiotics and not for others. And so that's one element. Number two, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, all these different things are elements that could also be involved. I can't say specifically about magnesium because I'm under a NDA. Yeah, I can't release that information, but I will say that we anticipate over the coming year, we'll be releasing some more information about that from a scientific paper perspective, not as anecdotal stuff. But I'm super excited about what's happening in this area relative to
Oh, well,
probiotics.
you're getting me excited. I mean, that's incredible. How about something like cognibiotics?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? And I'll just speak for just a second on behalf of my experience. I felt like my IQ went up by about 5 points when I started taking that religiously. Why is it the case?
So 95% of the serotonin that you produce in the body is made in your gut. And the elements that are involved in that, magnesium is one of those elements, as well as some certain prebiotics and a few probiotic strains that operate best on a certain component of prebiotics. So we were able to ascertain what probiotics, what prebiotics, and what elements would go for it. So for people who are looking to improve their mood and cognitive function, we find that doing cognibiotics with magnesium is an effective combination for feeling good feeling that serotonin provides. When you have sufficient amount of neurotransmitters, your cognitive capability, your connections between axon and dendrites fire more effectively, or fire at all, because if you have a depletion of neurochemicals Anybody that's gone out partying hard on a weekend with recreational drugs can tell you on Monday or Tuesday morning they're not operating at their scintillating best. We even developed a whole company called Nutopia, dealing with the various types of neurotransmitters and the precursors that led to improved cognitive function. And so that was our first early interventions on that, from the digestive and the gut side. And then Utopia spawned out of that to accelerate all that process moving forward, which has been really fun, and something that is irrefutable when you experience. You're like, okay, you know what? My brain's on today.
Yeah.
My verbal fluency, my cognitive recollection, my ability to concentrate, flow state, all of those are correlated with, number one, axon dendrite connections, which you can do from neurofeedback, and the availability of a wealth of neurotransmitters to facilitate those connections and transmissions that will allow you to perform at your best cognitively. And that's an area of we're super excited and continue to develop with Nutopia.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you that, the bulk of my work and efforts rely on my cognitive process and mental clarity. So I do everything I can to support that, everything. It doesn't matter how much money I have to spend or how much time or effort to read up and study something. Like, I will do whatever it takes to maintain my mental clarity. And so having played around with Nutopia for podcasts or for interviews or just to get in a flow state and be creative and get work done, it's been really, really sweet, really, really awesome. I want everyone to know that's tuning in that I take so much pride in being a partner and being part of the team, because this has genuinely changed my life and has genuinely supported my performance. And I couldn't ask for a better sponsor on this podcast. So I think, we're running really short on time. We're just a couple minutes left. Is there anything that you would like to conclude with before we head off?
We know when Matt and I started the company, we said that we're going to make the best products that we can possibly do. We're going to be built on mission, not on margin. So we're always at the premium side. But the one thing that we pride ourselves in is that we love people like yourself who are doing the real work and doing the experiments on themselves and sharing that information and moving forward, whether that is an individual just consuming the product and telling their friends and their family, or whether it's someone that has a podcast like you that's reaching, an extraordinary wide audience. So what we did to honor that is we literally provide what we call our 365-day guarantee. If anyone buys any of our products, tries it, and it doesn't deliver on what they thought it would, we just give them their money back. Hey, thanks for the experiment. Keep experimenting, keep growing, keep advocating for other companies and try other things, because we need this group of people to keep moving forward. We respect that money, we respect it's hard-earned money, and there's nothing more expensive than a product that doesn't work. But if our products do deliver, and I think for the most part they do, and that's why we have been around for 18 years, and that's why we have such a great track record, then we encourage you to tell people about it, share that with people, and we're delighted for that. So with that, I would say it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to part of this company, part of this mission, and to continue move humanity forward step by step, piece by piece.
Hey, thanks so much, Wade. What an honor. We'll talk very soon, my man.